This webinar today, I think it's one of the more important topics, and it can, if you understand and you absorb everything I'm saying today, it really can change, I think, the direction of your life and career. It's about a lot of things I'm talking about today. It's about actually whether or not you should even continue to practice law, how you should practice law, what you should do in order to be happy in your career and your life. And a lot of information that we're going to cover today is stuff that most attorneys, large proportion of them, never learn. I've worked with partners often, and partners that I work with are often the most guilty of what I'm going to talk about right now is trying to please others, not allowing other people to dictate what they do, what happens to them, instead of relying on things on what they would like to do themselves. I'm talking about that. Oh, give me one second. Sorry. One second. Apologize. Oh, notes fell down. All right, so I'm going to talk about that and also a lot of other things that I've noticed that people are really very concerned and make mistakes about by listening to what other people are saying, by not listening to what you want to do in your heart, and then living in many cases under a form of slavery where you're doing what you think other people expect of you instead of what you want to do for yourself. And as I was preparing for this, I thought of so many examples just in relationships where I was doing what other people expected, and my job, in many cases, and instead of doing things that I wanted to do that made me happy. So that's what I'm going to talk about today. I'm also this is a live webinar. I'll do the presentation, and then after a short amount of time, I'll just take like a minute or two off. We'll come back and I'll answer questions, whether it's about this or anything related to your career that you would like to ask questions about. And one thing that I think is interesting, and if you look around your life, there are people that will have negative judgments of you in where you work, and so you'll often try to avoid that. If you're in a certain type of religion, there's a certain type of behavior that you may be expected to have, and if you don't have that behavior, you'll also run into issues. If you do certain things, you're going to be concerned about how they feel, your family, the people that you're around. There's so many people that will have negative things to say to you and make you feel badly about yourself if you don't do things a certain way. And what's interesting is the most successful people, I was actually having dinner on Sunday with this woman that had dated one of the main founders of Google for a long time. And what's interesting when you look at the most successful people, even before they became successful. So it's one thing to say that you can do whatever you want but when you're successful, because that's true if you're a multi-billionaire, but at the same time, if you are in a position where, a lot of these people, he was just mentioning a lot of these, or she was mentioning a lot of these people before they even became very successful, didn't really care about others' opinions. And it's interesting because when you evaluate different types of groups, for example, creative groups in Silicon Valley, where these products are started and these new people become very successful doing things. What often happens in those environments is the people aren't afraid to try something and fail. They talk about what's possible instead of being and doing things the way everybody else is, which literally would apply to New York and whatever, Chicago, most other places except for a place like Silicon Valley. That's not to say that there aren't people like that all over, but there are pockets of places where creativity and where doing things differently than others is actually quite valued. And it's just an interesting way to look at things when you think about how people are different just in different types of environments, and how some people care about what others think and try to do what they want. And then also when you don't try to think so much about what others think and you do things on your own. And one final point that I'll make, and then we'll just get to the presentation, is being an attorney is a very middle class type of profession. Now, that doesn't mean attorneys don't become extremely wealthy and that sort of thing. But for the most part, an attorney is working for someone else. And in different levels of the profession, if you want to for decent sized clients, you're essentially going to be working for companies that have a lot more money than you, and you have to act a certain way and behave a certain way for those companies to hire you. And people go to law school because they want to get steady jobs that pay money, whereas people that have great amounts of wealth, probably most of them do not go to law school. And people that are poor and don't have good educations often do obviously not go to law school either. Being an attorney, people are very concerned about degrees and professions and doing things the way that others want them to. So that's the baggage that a lot of people carry into things. So every day when I sit down at work, it's actually not every day, but I do receive, excuse me, emails from, excuse me, I don't know what's wrong. I receive emails from different people about things that they may be upset about. So sometimes people may not like some company for whatever reason. Sometimes people will attack me personally for whatever reason, and other times people will read something I wrote and be very offended by it. You may be offended by what I'm saying today. And so when people are offended, sometimes instead of just looking at evaluating what I'm saying, they will say mean things to me. And it's whatever. It's not the world, but this is the kind of thing that people encounter that are out there in the world trying to do things. And some people will say very positive things to me, and most people, but other people will just say they're upset. So if someone comes to a company like BCG and they don't get a job right away, they may be upset and think that they should, even though they may have been searching for a job for months before we started working with them and haven't got them something yet. People get upset, but other people say very nice things, and other people post nice comments, and but other people will, even if they go to my Instagram, for example, they may see my family and say mean things about them, and other people will say that I didn't help them a lot and change the direction of their life. And so everybody gets different types of feedback. And the more you're out there trying to do things and people are seeing you, the more positive or negative feedback you're going to get. I have my daughter, it's very interesting. So it's funny, over Christmas break, she was playing this video game, Roblox, with her friends. And she's in college, she's in her first year. And she was playing this game called Roblox with her friends. And I mean, one second. Roblox. She was playing Roblox with her friends, and one of her friends, and someone was on TikTok, I think, and then someone came and gave them some money, and they were like, "Why is someone giving us money?" And there was someone that was watching them play, and I guess when you watch people do things like that and TikTok and stuff, then people can give you money. I never knew anything about this, but anyway, to make a long story very short, she started getting on there and every day and just like talking about what she had for lunch and all this stuff. And to her amazement, people started giving her money. And then she would take videos for herself studying. And I watched this stuff and I couldn't believe how benign it was. It was just cute, but there's nothing really to it. And pretty soon she had thousands and thousands of people following her and showing up to these things. And she's sometimes gets on for a couple hours a night, makes $1,000 or more. And it's just absolutely amazing. I can't believe this stuff happens. But she goes to a school where there's just a lot of very smart people, and what she's doing is completely out of the norm. And so she gets on to this TikTok stream, and she's got thousands of people to tell her she's great. But she goes to the school, and all of a sudden, all these people are jealous and being mean to her, not talking to her because it's not something that they probably could do. But at the same time, they're saying that this is beneath people, like it's just not the right thing. They started trying to do rumors that she was on OnlyFans and things like that, which is a site where people don't talk about what they had for dinner. They do other things, take off their clothes and stuff. But anyway, she's not. I've watched her on these things and it's just very cute. But people get jealous and they try to push down people that are doing things. So anytime you do something out of the ordinary, people will often come after you, and it won't be pleasant, and people do not like that. And sometimes people will post comments, obviously positive comments. And let me see here, I'm back. Apologize. Yeah, and let me send feedback. Yeah, so people do this sort of thing. They also go on forums and say positive things. And so what I'm saying is there's positive and negative reactions to everything you're going to do. And anytime you're doing something well, people will come and they will criticize you for various things that you're doing, or people will say nice things. And so people take criticism very seriously. And so the more you do in society, the more you try to do something for yourself often, or something that you believe in, you will often be exposed to a lot of criticism and a lot of people not saying nice things to you. And you just can't control it. It's just continually going to happen. So if you want to do the absolute best that you can in your life and in your career, you're going to have to stop worrying in many cases about not getting approval from others. You're going to have to worry. You're going to have to start trying to avoid that. And if you try to be productive, you're going to be criticized. And if you try to be successful, you're going to be criticized. And criticism is just an unavoidable thing that happens when you do something very well often. And what I've noticed in my life and in watching people succeed, and the longer I've done this, is the biggest achievers are people that aren't afraid to do something. And they continue to go forward despite what others are saying. Who would have thought you can make someone that's 19 or 18 or 19 years old can make $100,000 a year talking about what they did for their day? It's just absolutely nuts. But that's what, the world is if you do things that are different and that other people don't. But at the same time, you get negative criticism. And so if you are able to move forward in that this is the sort of stuff that separates people that are able to win from those that are going to lose. Because in my daughter's case, I know that all that criticism that she was receiving, most people in the face of that would have stopped. I probably would have. I don't know if I would have if I was in college. I was that as well. But at the same time, most people, when they see a lot of criticism, they stop doing things. People will withdraw affection. They'll do all sorts of things to stop you when you're stepping outside of what they consider what they want for you or what they think you should be doing if you're threatening them. And people that have courage are able to continue. Anyway, and what does avoiding criticism look like? What does that mean? It can mean a lot of different things. If you're unhappy in your job and you want to move jobs, you could move. If you don't want to be a lawyer anymore, you can really think about that and not worry about what other people will say. And you can do that. You can do all these different things. I've had these things happen. I've had some things happen before that were absolutely crazy. I was working with a woman years ago, and she was at a major law firm in New York and had been there like 2 or 3 years, like a top AmLaw 100 law firm, one of the most prestigious firms in the country. And she'd been there for 2 or 3 years. And then her husband moved to upstate New York. I don't know where it was, Buffalo or Rochester or something. And so she came to me to help her find a job. And I was able to find her a position in a large firm, or not a large firm by Rochester, Buffalo, by those standpoints, a good good sized firm. Certainly didn't have the brand. It wasn't an AmLaw 100 law firm. Back then, I don't even think there were any in the city that she was in. And so it wasn't as prestigious of a name as whatever firm she was at, and Melviny or something. And so she got that job and then a couple other jobs. And then as she was moving, I remember she was in the car with her husband with a van or something from New York, driving to this new city, and they were moving. And so I called her and I said, "What are you going to do?" And she said, "I just can't have people thinking that I took this step down. So I would rather stop working in a law firm than have people know I went to a firm like this." And I couldn't believe it. She was like so concerned with what other people would think by her going to a smaller firm, because she had to move someplace with her husband, that she stopped practicing law. I was astonished. And then I remember a few years later, I looked at LinkedIn and she hadn't been working. So literally fear of criticism of going to a less prestigious firm and then stopping practicing law because of it. It's amazing and it's hard to believe, but this is the sort of thing that people do when they're concerned about that. And there's all sorts of examples like that. So you need to do the things that are right for you and for your family and for your creative energy. You should be in a position where getting up every day is exciting for you, where you like what you're doing, where you feel like you're making a contribution, where you're happy. And this is a mistake that tons and tons of people make. They go into positions where they put themselves in situations where they're not happy, and they remain there because they're worried about disappointing people, their family, who knows, or what other people will think of them, what their law school classmates will think of them. They're worried about all these things. And because of that, they are never happy and they're never fulfilled. And I'll be just completely frank with you, because I think it's important. I just mentioned something. I think it's important you understand this. So people that are anybody that's good at something, like they do it and they actually enjoy it. It's fun for them. And you should go, if you're practicing law, and you may not feel this way, if you're practicing law, you should get up every day and you should be excited to go to work or sit down at your computer and start working. You should. And you should feel like work is play and not something that's stressful. You should feel that you're improving, you're looking forward to improving, you're looking for more responsibility. These are important things. If you don't, and actually you should also feel an obligation to do a good job for your clients. Like you really want to do a good job. That's important to you. You like working for clients and representing them. It makes you feel good having people's back and trying to get the best in a transaction or win something in litigation or whatever, or get someone out of trouble. You should feel that naturally. And if you don't feel that in whatever you're doing and you're doing it for other reasons, then that's not good because everyone has something that they're good at. I've concluded after 30 years of being in the legal profession and over 25 doing this, that people that are good at this, but everyone has something that they're good at. Everyone. It doesn't work that way where God doesn't give somebody something they're good at. It could be athletics, it could be practicing law, or it could be some type of law, it could be, I don't know, it could be interpersonal skills, but somebody has something that they're really good at. And that's where you should be putting your effort. You shouldn't be putting your effort into something that you don't like or that doesn't fulfill you, because that's just not going to lead anywhere positive for you. And very few people are ever succeed when they're doing something they don't enjoy. And one of the other things too is that when people start criticizing you, if you're doing the things you want that are making you happy, that's good. And the price of not being noticed and anonymity and just being behind the scenes is often a lot greater. The cost of that is greater than the price of criticism, because people that are criticized get better and makes them stronger. There's an interesting, I don't know, biography or movie or documentary or something about Taylor Swift, and that's interesting. She took a year off because everyone was criticizing her and it was just too much for her. And then she came back as just this incredibly strong person. And that's an example of somebody that happened to and came back strong. And then just think about different politicians, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. All the massive amount of criticism they receive and how they are able to overcome that and fight in the face of criticism. Business people, Elon Musk, look at how much people hate him, and but yet he's the richest man in the world. All these people, Donald Trump, anybody you can think of and point out has been the target of massive criticism. Anthony Robbins, attacked by people. And even though he's just a self-improvement person, people in the religious communities, whatever their denomination is, and the more they put themselves out there, typically the more they're criticized. And politicians are very interesting, because anybody that's elected to some sort of office is always going to be criticized. There's half of the people usually, or somewhat like that, will like you, and then the other half won't. And the people that they don't like, critics will write articles and comments attacking the politician every single day, just constantly. I remember when Donald Trump was elected president the first time, I couldn't pick up a paper other than the Wall Street Journal, but the New York Times, whatever paper I picked up, there were just article after article about and editorials about what an awful man he was. And then I turned on the radio, and if it wasn't Fox News and it was CNN, it was the same thing. It was like a live broadcast about how awful he was, and how everyone hated him, and just hate, and people are mad, and protest after protest. But then he became elected again. I remember when George Bush had been president. This was a long time ago. It was maybe when this is 1999 or 2000. I worked in an office tower in Los Angeles, but it was a cool office tower. I had the porch that I could go out, and I had a porch, and so I was sitting there on a Sunday afternoon working, and I opened a window, and then I went to this porch and looked out, and there was this just massive protest taking place in Persian Square. It was just filled with people, and there were people talking through loudspeakers, and they were all shouting. People were taking turns shouting, and they were calling him a Nazi executioner, a business failure, a racist hick, a cokehead, alcoholic, all these different things. They were saying whatever things that and I've actually met him. I don't know about all these things, but he comes across as a very nice and mellow person, and not someone that in person, that's how he comes across, and not someone necessarily that would, I don't know if he's a cokehead and alcoholic, but that would merit those kind of statements. But imagine if you were he and you heard thousands of people shouting things like that about you. It wouldn't make you happy. And imagine thousands of people criticizing you all at once. Just every time you picked up the paper, there was a harsh article about you. Every time you turned on the radio, people were saying negative things about you. And look at what happened to Trump after he, and again, I'm not taking sides for any politician. I'm just at the moment just telling you things that I've observed. But Trump, before he was elected president the second time, he was tried as a felon, and he had all these charges brought against him and all these people suing him and demanding money from him. And regardless of whether or not you believe he deserved it or not, imagine if something like that happened to me, I would be very upset. I wouldn't like it. It would make me withdraw. It probably would make you withdraw. If, like my daughter, if somebody girls were making fun of you and resentful of you, and because you were able to succeed like this on your personality and how you present yourself to the world, and everyone's jealous of you at this top 5 college in the country, that wouldn't make you happy, but you're doing something different and you're impacting the lives of, in the case of a politician, hundreds of millions of people. For Trump, Bush, and in the case of Taylor Swift, in the case of anybody that's very successful, the more successful you get, the more people are going to line up and not like you. And that's just something how it works. And so what do winners do, and what are people that are happy do, and what do people that are the most successful do at anything? They're able to, excuse me, they're able to push through criticism, and they proceed, and they don't give up, and they continue moving forward, and they don't allow others to push them down and to say negative things with them. And then because they have that perseverance, they usually do better and better. And winners don't worry about whether or not they're going to be criticized. And they keep going in the face of criticism, because usually, and I'll tell you a very important point, and I was talking to, not a billionaire, but I hate to keep bringing these kind of people up, but I encounter these people, and it just is very interesting to me how they perceive the world. People that are very successful, usually they're on a mission. So I was talking to this guy that is extremely successful, and he's got this business rolling up these types of companies, and then getting efficiency of scale. But he does it in one industry, and I completely believe in helping people cash out of their businesses and become independent. And then he just has a belief. He's a mission. He's on a mission. And so are politicians that are very successful. So are someone like Elon Musk, he's on a mission. So people that are on missions don't worry about criticism. They believe in what they're doing. And that's what makes people successful, is that having these missions. If you have a mission, and so if you don't have a mission in your career, in your life, that's a problem, because that's not someone with a mission is going to win. So anybody that started a great law firm has a mission. All these things are extremely important. A mission, it makes a major difference to what is in your soul and what's in your heart when you get up and you do something. People that follow religious leaders are on missions. People that are successful politicians are usually on missions. Successful business people are on missions. The most successful attorneys are on missions. The attorneys that everyone talks about in the news are on missions. Everyone needs a mission. So what I don't like, and I'm sorry, but again, this is another thing that's probably going to piss a lot of people off, but most attorneys are not on missions. They're just working for someone else. Even successful partners, they're making sure they have enough business to stay employed and for the firm to evaluate them positively. But they're not on a mission to be the best IP practitioner in the world, or to change technology, or to make sure that companies never have to pay verdicts. I don't know, make sure they never lose a case, make sure that they're the best in their practice area, that they work in a bigger and bigger firm. All these things, you have to have a mission. If you don't have a mission, then you're going to lose to people that have missions. It's as simple as that. I was looking at a law firm yesterday because one of my candidates was interviewing there, and it was the funniest thing. It was a partner. Give me one second. So, oh, it was the funniest thing. It was a law firm, and it said firm owner or something, and then it said partners, and then it said associates. So one side was like firm owner, and then partners, and then associates. And might not even the firm owner was something like, I mean, it was basically saying equity partner, partners, associates. And so there was the firm owner, and then there was like 25 partners, and then maybe 50 plus associates, but a firm owner. I just thought that was just so funny that there was just one person that was a firm owner. Now that guy's on a mission, right? So he's on a mission. He just doesn't want any other owners. He's on a mission. And so that's how it is everywhere, where the most successful people in any profession are on missions. And you have to be on a mission. And what if you're not on a mission and you're worried about what other people say, then you're never going to get to where you could be if you were not on a mission. Let me just fix this. Okay. Okay. And you have to take action. So that's another thing. So taking action is extremely important. And what does that mean? That means if there's something that you believe in that you're afraid to do, and you're not going to do it because you're worried that you'll be criticized, then that's a problem. What do you want to do? Is there something that is important to you to do so you're not criticized? And so you have to think that, and you're worried about being criticized. Sometimes it could be quitting a job and not practicing law anymore. Sometimes it could be moving into a larger market where you could do different things. Sometimes it could be practicing a certain type of law that you know you can do well in. All sorts of things, hobbies, changing your religion, all these different things that people can do that they never do because they have to don't take action. And taking action it's a big self-improvement type topic, but taking action means you make a decision to do something, and then when you make a decision to do something, you do it. And it's making that decision and then the action that's the most important thing in the world. I remember, I'll just give you an example of taking action. So when I was in high school, I went to this high school where it was in Detroit, and there were just all these, first of all, there were a lot of kids of high-ranking executives in auto companies. So they always had brand new cars that were really nice and expensive cars. And then it was mainly very wealthy kids in the school. And I was driving around in this Yugo, which is just probably, you wouldn't even remember it, but it was the cheapest car of all time. And I didn't like that. I didn't not having a nice car. I didn't like the fact that I couldn't take all these expensive vacations. I didn't like that I didn't live in a nice house, all these things. And it wasn't something that had ever been important to me before I started going to the school. But once I got there, I felt pushed down and all sorts of stuff. And so in the summer when I was graduating from college, I remember everyone in the class, some of them were going to be traveling and doing fun things. Others had internships already in auto companies and advertising agencies and things like that. And I was like, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to just sit around and let nothing happen. And so I went and I studied different businesses I could do. I read self-improvement books. I did everything I could. And I ended up starting a asphalt company, not even knowing anything about how to do asphalt work, and just took this major action to do it. And that was the most important thing. And then I did it and I started doing it. And because I didn't know what I was doing, I had made all of these terrible mistakes. I did bad work. I just had all of these horrible things. You put something on a driveway, for example, and if it rains, then it could rain, it stains the street, and then you have to do the work again and buy the materials, and just all these things that happen that were not good. And so tons of criticism, calls for refunds, and people angry with me. And then when I was at my school, people thinking, I guess, what is this guy doing? Starting this blue collar business, making fun of me and all these things. But what happened is I took that huge risk doing that. I did something that other people thought was crazy. I kept getting criticized by clients. I was doing horrible work. It was devastating. And then at one point bouncing checks and things because there wasn't enough money in my account. But I just kept pushing forward and I just kept doing my best. And then I ended up at one point in the summer, I had a very long summer because I went to University of Chicago. So I got out of school in June. And then back then, I think school started like in the third week of September. But I stopped working for a while because of criticism and everything that was happening and I just couldn't handle. And I actually became a garbage man. But then I was like, I've got to go back and I've got to fix these jobs that I did. And in the course of that, I met someone that needed their parking lot done and but I didn't and helped them and they hired me. And so I had good things happen, but I kept going. And because I kept going and I didn't allow other people to criticize me, and after these horrible things that happened, I didn't give up. I at the end of the summer, I'd made a lot of money and in a very short period of time. And I had this work to do all through law school. I put myself through law school doing it. I put myself through college doing it. I paid all of my living expenses, tuition, part of my tuition. And keep in mind, back then I was like 30, but I was paying a significant percentage of all that and had this incredible experience where I had self-esteem and I had learned how to start businesses. And that's one reason I did this, but I did it because I was able to push through criticism, not worry about what other people thought of me. And it's the same thing with what I do now. I was practicing law in a major law firm with very good income and I had a mortgage and not a lot of savings. And I quit and I started doing this and with on my own with no one and just incredible amounts of criticism from my wife at the time who thought I was crazy, through to people in my law firm that thought I was crazy. All of these things you do, but you do it and you when you go through and you do what you believe in. And everything that I did was in my heart. I was on a mission with this asphalt work because I didn't want to be held down and put to other people's standards and just be in this position where I didn't have the money I wanted to buy loans or all these different things. I was able to take action and fix things. And same thing with what I'm doing now. I didn't like being in an office every day in conference rooms, and I might have liked it a lot better now working remotely. But I didn't like that, and I didn't like the ambiguity in terms of becoming a partner and all these things that could happen. There was things I didn't like about it, and when I found out about this particular branch, what I do, it was something I believed in. I became on a mission. I'm still on a mission. And I wouldn't be talking about this if I wasn't on a mission. And I've been doing this for a quarter of a century. So you need to do what you believe. You need to know that whatever you're trying to do, you need to be on a mission and you're going to experience a lot of pushback. If a company tries to run a business that makes everyone happy, it's going to fail. And successful organizations are in businesses, are make decisions and people get upset with them and people try to make people think bad thoughts about their competitors and all this stuff happens. But if you're going to please everyone, you're just going to fail in your life and your career. And you simply cannot please everyone. And trying to please everyone just puts you in a position where you're never going to actually be happy. You're going to be someone that essentially is a slave to others' opinions. And that's just not a good thing. I was in this, I used to, well, it's not really that important, but be very interested in acting, and I was a professional, pretty close to becoming a professional actor. And I was in Italy, and Italy. I was in Italy in Rome, doing this acting workshop or something. This isn't too long ago. This is like maybe 7, 8 years ago. I don't remember, but I was in Rome, and there was this guy there, and he was from a small town in somewhere in Italy, and where he'd been living for a long time and since he was young. And he said something I thought was very interesting. Some of these acting workshops and things, they get very emotional and make people cry and stuff. And he started crying, and he was saying that in this town, it was just horrible because everyone knew what other people did. Everyone had opinions about other people. And so if you stepped out of line and you were doing things differently than other people, you would be ostracized and it was very difficult. So you always had to be watching what you said, who you were seeing with all these sorts of things. And so just a very unhappy existence because of that. And a lot of times, just to be honest with you, if you're in a small market, you're probably behaving in a certain way that you wouldn't have to behave if you were in a larger market. Or so if you're in a small town of 10,000 people and 20,000, I don't know, you're going to behave a certain way and compared to someone that's not. And so that's one of the reasons people many times leave for big cities because they don't want to be judged by others. Let me just see that. I'm sorry, look at this. I'm sorry, I'm just going through this. Okay, so yeah, so just think about that. And it feels badly to be criticized, but it's something you need to get used to it. And if you're criticized, you have to be able to believe in whatever you're doing and push through. And you just can't allow others to control what happens. I did want to bring up one kind of interesting point, and it's something for you to think about. One of the things about success is that anytime for you to succeed at anything, typically what happens is you will experience a lot of failures before something actually hits and you become successful. So you will try to do something, and then you may have some limited success when you start, but then you will fail. And maybe you'll fail again, and then maybe you'll fail again. But the people that succeed in anything are people that just keep pushing through, and they don't give up. And I'll tell you just in terms of the business that I'm in. So I started as recruiting in late 1999 or maybe the beginning of 2000. I don't remember exactly when. And I went for 4 or 5 months before I placed anyone. And a placement means that a law firm is going to pay you for hiring someone. And then I was almost out of money. I wasn't going to have enough money to probably pay my mortgage. My wife at the time thought I was crazy. I'd gotten married in like October, and then suddenly here I was quitting this great job, becoming a recruiter. And so I basically was at the end, everything looked like it was over. I was like, okay, I'm not succeeding at this. And then one Monday I got up and the phone was ringing. And so I picked it up, and it was a law firm. And they said, is it early enough for you? Because it was like 7 in the morning or something, but I picked it up. And I said yes, and they said they were going to make an offer to this one candidate of mine, and then they did, and then over the course of the next 4 or 5 days, if you can believe it, I got more people jobs, four or something like that, 4 or 5, and within 1 week, I made more money than I made in an entire year when I was practicing law in 1 week, and it came just at the very precipice of having failed, basically, like I thought everything was over. The same thing happened, by the way, at with my asphalt business. So I had failed and lost all this money, and then I spent the rest of the summer trying to accumulate enough money so I would at least have some spending money when I went to school and not have to work. And then I got towards the end of the summer, and I went back. It was interesting. I went back and I learned all this stuff, failing at asphalt. I learned the right way to put things on the right way to prep a surface, the right way to take care of cracks, the right way to mix the tar so it was a certain consistency. I learned all this stuff by failing, and I learned big lessons. And I was in a store buying materials to to go back and fix a job that I didn't have to. I've been paid by the job, but I wasn't pleased with the work. And so I went back. I called the person. There's two things happened that were interesting. So I called the person whose work I hadn't done a good job with, and I said I wanted to come back and fix it. And he said, no, you don't have to. And I said, no, I want to. So I went into a hardware store, and like a big Home Depot type place in outside Detroit. And there was a guy standing there trying to make some decisions about different types of seal coating to put on a parking lot. And he was looking at it and didn't know exactly what he should be doing. And so I sat there and I talked to him just gave him some free advice for maybe 45 minutes. I told him everything basically that I learned about how to do this. And he said, what did he say? He said, could you do me a favor? Because I'm thinking about hiring a company to do this. Can you go tell me how much I should be spending and just take a look at everything? And I said, sure. And so I went there, and I got there at 9 at night, and there was this giant condominium complex. And so it took me maybe 2.5 hours to measure it because you have to walk around with a roller thing. And then I calculated the surface area, and then called him the next day and told him all this stuff. And then I'm glad to help. And then I went back and I fixed the job where I hadn't done a good job the next day or the next evening after my garbage man work. So I used to I had a motor scooter. And so I would go to the Department of Public Works in the morning. So I'd get up at 6 or something and go, or 6:30, go there. And then I would get in a garbage truck and go basically ride in the back of the garbage truck and put the garbage bags in the back until maybe, I don't know, 3 in the afternoon or something, but I got a lunch. And so at 11 o'clock, I drive home and get lunch. And when I went home and get lunch, my mom said that this guy had called. And so I called him back from the condominium and he said, you seem like you would really do a good job of this. You're the only person I spoke with that seems to really know what they're doing and be excited about this. And so I'd love you to do the job. And I think the amount I told him he should be paying was like $10,000, $10 or $11,000 equivalent today. And it cost me maybe $1,000 or $1,500 in materials. So I went out and I did the work. I quit my garbage man job and I made that much money. And it took me maybe 2 days and that was it. And so I went to school and I had all this incredible self-confidence. And so I'd succeeded and I'd done, but I literally was at the end of my rope. Everything was over. And I hardly had any savings from being a garbage man. I was making maybe the equivalent of $5 an hour back then. But the other thing that's interesting that happened too is then the guy whose driveway I went back and fixed, he lived in a very expensive home, probably equivalent of a $3 million home now. Then he called me and he said, I'm so impressed you did this. You didn't have to. Please call me when you get out of college. I'd love to offer you a job. And I thought that was amazing. So all these things can happen if you believe in what you're doing, even if people are critical of you. I got certainly a lot of negative feedback all these different times. You can, if you push through these things, you can do very well in your life and in your career, and you should be. You should be doing things. And so many careers are derailed, and so many people are unhappy because they worry about what other people are going to think, and then they don't. And then when negative things happen to them, they don't continue pushing through. And most people, attorneys especially, they worry about how things will look to others. They worry about how things look to the people they went to law school with. They constantly worry about what others will think of them. And because of this, they stop acting and they stop doing things and they stop making bold decisions. And because of this, a lot of opportunities disappear. It's just, this is what happens. And people do not reach their full potential because of this. And I can't tell you how many people are unhappy and how many lives are damaged because of this and how many people literally never reach their full potential, never do what they thought they could. They stay in different legal markets because they want to be close to their parents, because they don't want their parents to criticize them. They do things, even though it's not in their best interest, only for their spouse, because they don't want people to criticize them. They put themselves in situations where others will be taking advantage of them, but they don't want other people to criticize them. And people everywhere are limiting what they could do to really be successful. And they limit what what they're attempting. And they do all these things. And because they do these things, their lives are nowhere near what they could be. I'm sure that you're probably affected by this in some way as well. I'm affected by it. I worry about just very strange things about what other people think about certain things. Now, I'm not talking about major things, but small things and what I should be doing with my life, what I should be doing with where I live, how I spend money, how I save or don't save, all these different things. And the people that are unaffected by this are the people that you typically will see and learn about in newspapers and television. And the people that have the best lives typically are the ones that face the most criticism. They have a different mindset. They don't care and they stand for something. They understand the fact that if you try to do anything, criticism is unavoidable and they act on it anyway. I was just so impressed with my daughter when she was able to push through all this stuff. And I told her, I said, if you stick with this in I don't know, in 2 months, instead of having 25,000 Instagram followers, you'll have 50,000. And then a year from now, you'll have 1 million and all this stuff. And if all you have to do is push through this and not worry about what other people say. I'll never forget, I was working with this partner and very successful partner that had been at a major American law firm for most of his career. And when I became a recruiter, I actually used to work for him, and he knew how seriously and how enthusiastic I was about when I was an attorney, how seriously I took it. So I think he did figure if I worked with him, I would do the same thing. And so he contacted me, didn't know how to do his job search. His career had been just extremely successful all the way around. As far as I knew, he hadn't ever really failed at anything. He went to an Ivy League college, Ivy League law school. He had very significant clients. And he was dedicated. He understood what he was doing. He was very competent, and he was considered, he had a very good reputation. As a matter of fact, he was such a good attorney that he had never officially lost a trial, all that sort of stuff. And he was very respected, and people thought very highly of him. And so I even saw he wrote articles about him in newspapers and famous clients and celebrities that he knew personally. I got to work on some of those, which was fun. His wife was a very well-known Los Angeles socialite. I'd seen her in the papers, and they had these sort of style magazines around town. And when I started working with him, I recognized her immediately from these pictures in the LA Times and so forth. And so when he approached me, I was just my job. I was going to introduce him to some new law firms and see if they were interested in hiring him. And I wondered who would let me do that. And what was missing is that he needed to find a job. He was in a position where he was losing his job. So that even though it looks very great, I mean, he's in this position and having these clients, it actually wasn't, because he was in trouble. When you need a job, many times it can be very scary because you're suddenly in a position where you don't know what you're going to do, and it can be very difficult. And friends often won't help you. When you ask people for a job, they just act differently. They're not your friends. They don't act the same way. Just another aside, which I'll tell real quickly. I was working with, years ago, one of the top attorneys at General Motors, like maybe the number 3 attorney. And he was losing his position because something had gone past his desk just briefly about a effective seatbelt. He didn't act on it properly, so he was losing his job. He didn't get fired like them, but he didn't have much time to search for a job. And so he'd given work throughout his career at General Motors to all these large auto companies and things, where Chrysler and Chrysler's called Stellantis now, but Chrysler, Ford, given all these companies like lots of work, like probably tens of millions of dollars at least. And then so he contacted me and said, "Oh yeah, I'm sure they'd love to have me," and so forth. And so I reached out to the head, like the chairman of, actually it was Dickinson Wright and Dyke and McGoss. I reached out to the heads of those firms, and it was just crickets. Like no one was interested anymore. They knew he was losing his job and he was of no use to them anymore. And so these were people that he'd been friends with, on golfing and on trips with. And I'm not saying the chairman of these firms were, but the people that he were his client that had hired him, or that he had hired inside the firm. So just no one cared. Even though he'd given them all this work and they were his friend, suddenly when he needed a position, everything changed because he could no longer serve them. And I think that must have been very hard. And so this particular attorney was a great attorney. He was feared. He won all the time. He was very good. And when he started feeling that he needed to find a job, he felt like he was showing weakness, because he'd always been like this very formidable person that people looked up to, feared. And so he going to people inside of firms where they knew him and where he won cases and acted in a certain way, it wasn't something that he was interested in, because he didn't want to ask people for help. And so what happened was quite interesting. He ended up only allowing me to approach on his behalf a couple of law firms, and those law firms were not anywhere near the prestige level I could have gotten him a job at, had he allowed me to approach these firms where he was worried what they would think of him by needing a job. Very interesting. Out of all the law firms he could have worked in Los Angeles, maybe 100 really good ones, then out of those, he chose to allow me to apply him and get him a job in only 2 of the smaller ones that he'd never had any contact with and didn't really know very well. And because of that, he ended up making much less money than he could have. Because of that, he put himself in a position where he was not as large of a firm, where he couldn't work on the same caliber of clients, probably most likely, because he was afraid, and this is again someone at the very top of their game, he was afraid of what other people would think of him. It was fascinating. And so, yeah, I got him a job, but nothing near what he could have gotten, because he was so worried about what people think of him. And I've seen that happen to so many people. Often they're too worried about things. They don't, sometimes people will be worried about applying to a firm because they're worried what people that firm will think of them if they need a job. It happens. And it's interesting. And I told you originally what happened to me about recruiting. I quit my job in 2000, and then the firm I was at asked me to stay for 12 weeks. They said that if I was unhappy there, I should find another job because if I left a firm and without a job, people would presume that I might have lost my job. And so that would make it even harder for me to get a job. So they told me that I should find another position, which was very nice actually. And I was originally going to open up my own legal practice. I wasn't particularly enthusiastic about having my own practice, but I had clients. I had then probably the equivalent of $500,000 of clients as a third-year attorney. And the firm suggested instead of just leaving and doing this, I should go speak with recruiters and other law firms first and consider my options. And I did. And again, it's important if you can just to never leave a law firm without another job lined up. And it makes it a lot easier. And the reason being that if you're a law firm, you're typically going to hire people that are employed versus unemployed because the person that's unemployed, you don't know why they're unemployed. And so I began talking to recruiters and then I also reached out to friends in other law firms and I started seeing, okay, I'll get a job. And it was very embarrassing calling friends at other law firms, telling them I was looking for a job. I was at a great firm. I was at like a firm back then that was like paid. It was one of the top three highest paying law firms in Los Angeles. I explained that I quit my job. Most of them didn't believe me. They thought that I'd been fired. And so after making several calls to friends and people that I knew, I decided I didn't want to go through this anymore because it was just too discouraging. And it was discouraging. One of the funniest things that happened is related, but I was looking for a job and my friend had a client. He thought he was a client. I don't know what he was, but he was this Russian man, and this man appeared to be running a Ponzi scheme. And so he said something to the effect of he wanted me to come work for him for free to prepare some investment documents for oil wells or something that he was claimed to oil control in Russia, and he was going to try to sell an interest in them here. And then he said I would be paid later from investments that he raised from wealthy people in Los Angeles. And this type of experience is not pleasant when someone is trying to con you to do work for them for free. And so things like that were uncomfortable. It was uncomfortable going out on interviews like that. And I've actually had candidates where they've interviewed with firms, not through me, but where they've actually asked them to pay to work there, which is crazy. And I didn't depending on friends. I felt it was embarrassing because I got this great firm and I was going and asking people at smaller firms for advice on a new job, even though I was just getting myself out there to talk to people. I didn't need a job, but I was thinking based on what the firm had told me, I should definitely investigate these options. And so I made a decision that I didn't want to have my friends help me because that to me was embarrassing. And so I ended up talking to recruiters. And when I talked to recruiters, the funniest thing happened. I just became incredibly interested in what they were doing. And I ended up starting a recruiting firm literally while I was employed still effectively at the law firm I was at. And when I started it, I made sure that people couldn't see my name associated with it and so forth, and the whole story associated with that. But to make a long story short, it's very funny. I went out and I interviewed with a firm where I had a candidate. And that firm where I had a candidate, I was interviewing with the firm. I didn't have an interview with my candidate, but I went out to interview with a firm where I actually had a candidate. And he was similar class level to me. And so I was employed with a law firm, then interviewing with a firm where I had a candidate. There are people out there, for example, that can help you get jobs and networking, but I, again, didn't talk to enough places through friends. I guess I could have. Became concerned about it. This partner that I was talking to you about was hesitant, and he just didn't want people to find out he was looking for a job. He worried that it would spread, that it would undermine his brand, and people approach things this way. And And the higher you are in the profession, typically, the market, if you want to stay at a very high level, can be very contracting. And again, it's just how it works. And second here. And so, different things about compensation, and it's not, but this particular guy had 4 months. And during those 4 months, as I said, I met with him several times. It was funny too, just to tell you how nervous people are. When I met him for lunch when he was looking for a job, he would always try to he had this restaurant that he liked to go to where he could get a table where no one could see us talking because he was so nervous about that. And he didn't seem in a good place when all this was going on. I could tell he was terrified, even though he was literally extremely highly regarded attorney that certainly was not terrified when he was working. His whole search seemed to be just being concerned about what other people might say. Now, keep in mind, when you talk about an attorney like this, just to give you a sense of how powerful this guy was, back then he was making, I don't know, $3 million a year, maybe maybe a little bit more than that. So that today would probably be five or six. I don't know, but extremely well compensated. But yet he was so afraid of what other people would say to him, and he didn't know how to conduct a job search. So even though he was extremely competent and well paid as an attorney, he wasn't in a good space when all this was going on. And so he just didn't, in terms of the prestige, he was concerned about that and all these different things. And restaurants, I told you about that earlier, and all these sorts of things. And I told him eventually he first was afraid to apply anywhere. And then all this kind of ended up happening. And his whole career went on a path that it didn't have to. And he could have actually done much better, gotten into firms where he could have made similar compensation. All these things happened to him. So why do I bring up that example? I bring up that example because I'm trying to show you that the most successful attorneys out there often just are consumed by what other people think of them. And in most professions, there are people like that. They're like that with doctors and just all these different professions. And when you fear criticism, you're going to hesitate. And this hesitation will reduce your opportunities. The world only opens up to you when you're able to rise above that sort of criticism. It just doesn't happen any other way. This is an aside, and it's not necessarily maybe appropriate for a talk like this, but I was talking to this guy, I don't know, maybe I was on Monday, I was talking to this guy, and he was someone that I was just involved in some business stuff with. And he was very religious and Christian and telling me about all these things. But what's interesting is you just look at religious figures. So if you look at Jesus, who he was talking about, all the criticism, it's just the entire New Testament when he steps onto the scene is just people criticizing him and him just pushing forward. I'm the son of God. I was helping miracles and saying things to people, that all these people criticizing him and attacking him until he's finally killed. But then he becomes a martyr. But the point is that there's always, in every story, there's people that are going to be criticizing the people that are the most successful people. And in the case of Jesus, that's one of the great historical figures, regardless of whether you're Christian or whatever you believe. There's certain people in the world, Napoleon, whoever, that face an incredible amount of criticism. And Napoleon's not a good example, but they come out the other side, something positive happens. And I've seen people stay in jobs that they're unhappy with for years because they're controlled by their fear of criticism. I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. I've seen attorneys in major law firms like become partners, but when they're associates, they call me and they talk to me about, oh, I'd like to get a job that's in a smaller firm where there's less stress, and then I get them the job and they're like, no, I don't know what people would think if I went in with smaller firms. And then I can think of a couple very sad examples, and maybe actually more than that. Yeah. Keep in mind, I've been doing this for a long time, but I have several examples of people that stayed unhappy in firms, very smart people, became partners, but they just couldn't leave, even though they were unhappy. And they told me they were unhappy, but they stayed. and then died. They died in, it's actually sad, but it's extremely sad. And I just feel cry, I'm not gonna cry, but they ended up dying, usually in their, both, I think, in their, one in the early 40s, something like that. Both in the early 40s, heart attacks, and just, yeah, it's too bad. And people will often just stay where they're at because they care about how it's going to look to others, and all these things. And so it just happens a lot. And when I say people are dying, I actually mean people are dying, like a lot of people are dying. And I don't know, maybe it's normal for a certain percentage of the population to have heart attacks and get cancer and become alcoholics and things. I guess it's normal in it doesn't matter if you take a cross section of the population. But for me, I've seen it happen with people that affirmatively approached me, wanted something less stressful, didn't what they were doing, but stuck with it largely because they were concerned about what other people thought. And again, this sounds absolutely insane, but this is not worth dying for. It's just not. It's not, nothing about this profession or this job is worth dying for. You just can't do it. You don't want to die because you're doing what you think other people expect of you. Other things that happen, I see a lot of men where they get into this position where they have a wife and kids, and then they decide that they don't like it and they're unhappy, but there's no way they can escape because they have all these expenses. And then boom, they spend decades unhappy and just trying to get through it. And or they start drinking too much. And it's very common, or I don't know, and or lots of affairs, and it's terrible. Well, instead of doing something that they might like, which is very important. People often will find, for whatever reason, my personal email address, but personally my work address, but I'm asking me to help them find work. There's people that will, track me down. I'm a recruiter, but I don't recruit full time. And I understand how job searches work pretty well, I think. And it's just from seeing what works and doesn't work. And I'll tell you the way that the effective job searches work. And I hope you pay attention because, again, most people don't. If you pay attention, this could hopefully help you. So if you're looking for a job, it's one of the most important events that you will experience in your, I would, life maybe, but a career, if you get it right, it's like a marriage or something. People don't always think through their job search and what they should be doing. They think they know everything. But if you choose the wrong spouse, things could be horrible, or significant other. If you choose the wrong job or firm or employer, things can go very poorly for you. So you should always be aware of what's important. And if you're able to do that, you're going to be much more successful than not. And so your skill is going to determine doing that, how successful you can be. And to find the best jobs, and this is something that most people, attorneys, do not understand, and this is extremely important, to be able to get the best job, the most options, find a place that you're happy, and do really well. The most important thing you can do is you have to be able to, you have to be able to not care what other people say. You have to not worry about being judged. You have to realize that you're doing something that's important, and it doesn't really matter what people think of you. You need to basically be doing whatever's in your power to find the right job for you. Meaning there are the average attorney, like if you got an offer at the firm you end up in is, if you're looking for a law firm job or you're looking in-house, is unbelievably beyond important. Why is it unbelievably beyond important? It's unbelievably beyond important because the better firm you're at, if you land in the right place, you can be happy, you can be successful, you can have good relationships, you can get the work you want, you can feel good about yourself. And if you land in the wrong place, it's the exact opposite. And most people take the first job they get, not all, but most people. And so you have to find the right environment. And again, I've seen people that you never could have imagined become successful, become incredibly successful just by getting into the right environment. But most people, a lot of people don't. And so most people don't think about the environment enough and enough where they're ending up. So you have to really think about this, and then you have to do whatever you can to find a job, and you have to put a lot of effort in, and you have to look at a lot of different places, and you have to act boldly. You have to do what other people aren't doing. And if you do that, you're going to have a much better chance of getting a position. And you have to take action, and you have to actually do a very extensive job search in most cases. And you need to have a responsibility for your job search, and you need to have a mindset where you're doing everything in your power to find the right place, and you don't care what other people think of you. And what do other people do when they're looking for jobs? Most people, when they're looking for jobs, will choose a few job sites, and they will start applying to jobs there. Or they'll reach out to some people that they know, but they will be careful about reaching out to certain people because they don't want to telegraph any weakness. And they will try to get jobs the same way everyone else is, or maybe they'll talk to one recruiter. They'll do whatever they do. But these types of searches where you're following the crowd and so forth rarely lead to the best results. As a matter of fact, most people, because they do their job search in the correct way, even though it's one of the most important possible events in your life and can determine the entire course of happiness and success and happiness to your family, all these things. This is why I like this job so much and believe in it, is because I can change someone's direction. My first law firm that I belonged in, Quinn Emanuel, that was an incredible place. When I was there, it was like 40 attorneys, and people were certainly overworked, but they're getting incredible experience. And the people that stayed there that I know became incredibly successful, and they like what they're doing. I read about them in the papers. And then I went to another firm that paid a lot more, a New York-based firm. It's called Dewey Ballantyne, it's no longer in existence, in Los Angeles, and it paid the third highest of any firm in LA. And there was three firms, Skadden, Milbank, and this firm that paid the highest back. And this was a long time ago. And then I went there, and that was a very unpleasant place to work. They were letting attorneys go. They were doing all these, our partners go. The firm is contracting, and they didn't have enough work. And there's all these things were wrong with it. And so I made a mistake, and that was the wrong environment. And so if you wind up in the wrong environment, then you can be in trouble, and you get a wrong issue anywhere across the country. So if you drive across, so you end up in the wrong environment. So when you're applying for a job, what do? You don't just apply to jobs. You reach out to every single firm you possibly can think of that does what you do in your practice area that you would consider working at in your market, or if you want to work in other markets, the same thing too. And this is how people find things that make them successful, where people actually need them, where there's potential, where there's growth, and you can connect with the right people and all these different things. It's just these crazy things happen to me. Last year, I don't think it's happened yet this year, but I was working with all these trust and estates attorneys. And so I had trust estates firms. I'm like, you have nothing to lose by applying to more than just the trust and estates jobs. Let's target all the small firms with trust and estates practices. And I had 3 or 4 candidates that were associates, and we reached out to some of these, and they let me apply them to a lot of firms, like maybe 100 plus or 150, I don't know, 200 trust and estates firms in the markets they were interested in. And I think it was maybe 4 or 5 of them got offers from firms like that were run by a couple of attorneys, maybe one attorney, 2 attorneys, 3 attorneys. And they were like, hey, we're all retiring in less than 2 years. So we just need someone to step in and take over this multi-million-dollar book of business. I'm not kidding. And that's what you get when you apply to more than just openings and things. Incredible things can happen like that. Imagine walking into something, you're making $80,000 trust and estates attorney in Fresno, and then, okay, I'm going to send my resume to all the firms in San Mateo County. This stuff happens, and it's just very interesting, and how all this stuff works. And there's every town in the country, there's all these small businesses and things. Where I grew up, in the corner of the street, there was a small ski store. And then I remember on the street where I grew up, and across the street, there was a small hardware store. And then near that was a bike shop and a pet store. And, oh, excuse me, what's here? And years later, I hadn't been home in like 15 to 20 years. It's not where my parents lived anymore. And I was curious. I drove down the street. I went into the streets and saw my old house and things. I wanted to see what had changed. And I couldn't believe it. I went into the hardware store, and the people that owned it were still there. They were older, but they were still there. And all of these stores, the ski stop, everything was the same. And these are the lives that most people lead. The hardware store was now led by the son of the guy that owned a small hardware store, but he was very smart. I remember in school, math and things, and the ski store, all these things, everything was just there. Now, I'm not saying these are the wrong decisions for the people to continue running these businesses and stay there, but sometimes people just don't grow, and their situation stays the same and nothing changes and they stagnate. And these people there probably would have didn't step out of their comfort zone and do something different. And if you do something different, it's going to expose you to criticism. So everyone, these people all stayed doing what they were doing, almost hiding, because there's never going to get too far ahead. And people don't often push themselves out of their comfort zone because they're scared of what other people may think of them. Now, again, there's nothing wrong with owning a bike shop for 30, 40 years, or actually these bikes, all of those stores were there when I was 5, so they were there 40 years later, 50 years later. These same families and the partner in the firm, like I told you about, hiding from judgment. A lot of us are doing the same thing. People hide from it, they don't take action. And anybody that's doing something worthwhile, that becomes a leader, that becomes really good at something and actually happy. So I told you, and successful. I told you just a minute ago about these trust and estates attorneys that walked into these situations where they were literally taking over someone's business because that person wanted to retire. So the firm, and these firms didn't have openings. Like the person that I sent just appeared. But those attorneys had to take a risk and say, Harrison, let me help you find, I'll let you help me find a job by allowing you to approach all the firms you think could be interested in me, even if they don't have openings. So they allowed that. They didn't say, oh, if I get rejected by all these firms or something, the firms are not going to like me or people won't like me or I'll feel badly about myself. They didn't care. They're like, I understand the biggest mistake I can make is under marketing myself. And so that's important. And most businesses and people are never do what they just hem themselves in doing the same thing. They don't take risk and nothing remarkable ever happens. And most people are following the rules and scared what other people are thinking about them and never reach their full potential. Same thing with companies. Most companies go out of business. They continue doing the same thing. If you were to look at all the companies that were on, go 20 years back, of the 500 largest companies in America, all these companies drop off just because they continue doing the same thing. They didn't change. Blockbuster Video. Think of all these companies that are constantly going out of business. They don't change. They just keep doing the same thing. And people don't like criticism. It makes them stop doing what they're doing. They don't take risks. They don't do what makes them happy. They don't grow. All these things. And it happened to me. It could happen to me when I stopped criticism. And I just keep going. I thought I don't have a choice. I believe in what I'm doing. So I continue doing it. I'm not saying I'm any type of hero because people certainly do a heck of a lot more than I do and take a lot more risk than I do. But if you take risk and you do something differently, then you're also likely to get a lot of praise eventually. And because you're going to do something that benefits other people that other people can't do. And that risk taking is what makes people become very successful and not fail. The fear of judgment is something that shapes decisions, and so they limit their own potential. There was a funny quote from Elon Musk, and he was, I don't know, he was trying to land a rocket on a barge somewhere in the ocean just to show he could do it, and it went down and exploded, and it was like incredible amount of money he lost, or the company lost, and it had happened multiple times, and this is amazing, this is really good, and everyone was making fun of him and saying he was going to fail, and like this company was going to fail, and his response was, this is actually really good news. Now we know we've learned a lot from this, and we can succeed the next time we do it. And it's interesting the way people think about it. People don't apply to enough jobs. People are afraid to call their friends because they don't want to look weak, or to apply certain places where they know people. And people will avoid opportunities because they're worried about how it's going to look to others. And people fail to run their businesses in a certain way. They just stay under the radar. And certain people don't dress the way they want to or act the way they want to. Certain people ignore their sexuality. They may be of a certain sexuality and act a certain way because they don't want to be seen as gay or whatever. It's people make these mistakes themselves. They hold themselves back and they're never happy. And imagine that if you were gay or something, not being able to be the person you are because you're too scared about what other people think. Think about how awful that is. And that's, there are people have that and they don't want to be judged many times. And people may get into marriages where they don't want to just disappoint their family because in their arranged marriages, even though they're not maybe attracted to the person, sometimes people are afraid to drive the sort of car they drive. I drive a pickup truck and I live in, and if I cared about what other people were thought of me, I wouldn't be driving that around a nice area of LA. All these things that people want to do. Yeah, hobbies, safety over authenticity, all these things that people do just by being concerned about what other people think about them, and just paralyzes people. And even though people aren't criticized, they worry about what other people think about. Think about what's going through your mind space all the time too. What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about often what other people will think of you? What is going through your mind? And people avoid doing all these things they're capable of doing. They hold themselves back because they're worried about that. And so that fear makes people decide certain things. And so I don't like hearing criticism. It affects everyone, but you have to push through and you have to remind yourself that criticism means people are paying attention, and it means something you're doing is being noticed. My daughter, just go back to that example, she's suddenly never been happier because this following's growing, the money she's making is growing, and she's getting all this positive feedback, even though there's this one aspect of her life where she's not. And it's awesome. And so my job, most people like what I do, appreciate it, but a lot of them don't, and that's okay. And most people are ignored. Most people are just invisible. And like the people that operate in the stores in the town I was on, and I'm afraid to step out of the new kids afraid to leave, and who knows why they stuck around. But being noticed is just much better than being invisible, and being successful is much better than being invisible, and loving your job is much more than being invisible, and getting positive feedback and doing something that nurtures your spirit. And I'm just going back to job search here because I want you to, this is, I'm obviously a recruiter and I'm trying to give you advice about how to run your career and your life. But in order to get a position and to be successful, you do need to put yourself in a position where people are seeing you and where you're getting noticed. And you need to be noticed to get a job. And visibility means there's going to be rejection. So if you apply to, I'm not suggesting this high of a number, but you could, 1,000 places instead of 100 or instead of 10, a lot of people are going to see your resume. Now, they're not going to care. They're not going to remember your name. They're not going to, but a lot of people will, and you're going to get much better results than if you didn't. And if your heart and your intentions are pure, you really shouldn't care what other people think. If you believe in what you're doing, you shouldn't care what people think. And integrity, the opinions of others should control your actions to some extent, but for the most part, not. And if people do criticize you, it doesn't mean that you just can't worry about it. It's just part of being good at what you do. And so criticism, by the way, is usually jealousy or fear. That's what it is. It's jealousy of of whoever you are, and whatever you're doing is what it is. And if people are jealous of you, that usually means you're doing something right. And any time in history when people come out with new ideas, they're criticized. And an interesting book, it's called The History of Scientific Evolutions or something. I don't remember what it is, but that's how it works in science. So someone comes out with a new idea and some new discovery, and that person and that idea is usually just attacked and attacked because people are trying to tear it down because they're defensive of what they know and the ideas that they're operating under. If it's in chemistry, everyone's got some certain ideas about how certain things work in chemistry. And then someone comes out with this new thing that completely turns it up on its head. And at first, the person's usually criticized and attacked, and no one pays attention to it, and they think it's made up. But eventually people don't ignore it, and then the person becomes a Nobel laureate or whatever. And that's how it works in science. And so you have to worry, you have to think about yourself, what's happening to you. What are you worried about doing about being criticized? And then if you lose a job or relationship or maybe whatever. Sometimes people will, even with drugs or alcohol, they'll be worried about stopping that because they'll lose their friends, or people will, all these things. People don't step out of unhealthy boxes. And so if you're criticized, the benefits are usually much greater than the fact of what happened. And you just can't run your life around worrying about being criticized. It's just absolutely impossible. Because if you do that, you're never going to be happy. And you have to do what makes you happy, not what makes others happy. Who around you is, are you worried about being criticizing you? Are you worried about your coworkers or people that you've known, or are you worried about your spouse or your significant other or your family or your friends? Who are you worried about criticizing you, and why? Does it really matter if you're doing what you want? Because ultimately, the only person you're responsible for and you should care about is yourself, not other people. Okay, so we'll take a quick break, and then when we come back, I will do questions, and answers. I will answer questions about anything that you have questions about in your career. The Q&A is often the most important part of the presentation, just because I think a lot of times you will hear questions that people have that you may not have thought about, and those questions that apply to you, but you may not want to ask, and those questions can go a long way and to help you in your career too as well. And yeah, so you're helping a lot of people when you ask questions. So I'll be back in just 1 minute, and then when I come back, we will do questions. Thanks. All right. Sorry. Nope. Sorry about this. Oh, no. Oh, that's not good. Give me a second. All right. Give me one second. And I would encourage everyone, any questions you have, again, doesn't have to be related to the webinar today, but any questions you have are questions that the answers will be helpful for not just you, but for other people as well. Answers. Okay, second. Yeah, what's interesting too, this particular question, which thank you, it says, I've been able to be a better lawyer because of your webinars. Thank you. I'm a new hire. How do I navigate working with a lawyer of the same rank as me who is passive aggressive? She does this in her emails with staff. She began doing the same to me. The partners are aware of this, are aware, and one told me not to treat staff the way she does. Yeah, by the way, these sorts of webinars are a good idea. It's very smart watching this sort of information. It's actually, in many cases, I would say, in my belief, it's can be just as important as a lot of things you learn in your day-to-day work, because having the tools to succeed, understanding social dynamics and all that sort of thing can actually help you. I mean, just what we talked about today, goal setting, not worrying about criticism and so forth, can help you in a major way compared to what a lot of people are who can help you quite a bit. So it's very smart watching these sorts of things, understanding how law firms work, understanding how careers work, because just one mistake, like just staying in something because you're worried about criticism, can be very harmful. So if you're going to run into any attorney that's working in a law firm is going to run up against coworkers that are mean and difficult, superiors that are mean and difficult, clients that are mean, judges that are mean. And so you're always going to run up against very difficult people, and that's just part of the job. And so it's up to you to control how you interpret that and how you feel about people and how you feel about yourself when that sort of stuff happens. You either can deal with it and you can be psychologically strong and balanced, or you can allow it to upset you. And so you have to be able to control your psychology and how things that happen to you like that, how you interpret it. And it's as simple as that. So if it was me, I would just realize that's what the profession is about. If you're a partner in a law firm, other partners know your compensation and they want to make more money. Give me 1 second. Someone's outside my door. So if you're a partner, other partners will know your, this keeps happening. I apologize. There we go. Oh, so if you're a partner, other partners will be know your compensation and potentially trying to tear you down. If you're an associate, it's the same thing. People want to see you make mistakes. And so it's just that's how it is in any competitive environment. It could be like that in an investment bank. It doesn't matter. In the legal profession, it's like that. So you have to learn social skills and meaning not to allow things to affect you. And you have to be able to push through when that sort of thing happens. Oops, what happened here? Okay, give me 1 second. And thanks, by the way, for these questions. People are asking really good questions, and I certainly appreciate it. Thank you. And the more of these you can ask, the better, because again, all this sort of stuff. The last question was very helpful. This question is helpful. People. Yeah, I'm a new hire, and I recently learned that I was hired because an attorney is going on maternity leave. Okay. I'm worried that I'll be let go when the attorney comes back. What can I do? Also, that attorney has made comments that they're unhappy that I joined because I'm taking their work, that they do intend to return. How do I handle the situation? How do I protect myself? What I would recommend, so there's a couple different things you can do. The first thing I would do is my advice would be to try to make sure you get work from as many other people as you can. I don't know how big your firm is. I don't know, but you want to try to get work from a lot of different partners if you can, or people that are can give you work, because the more work you have to do and for the more people, then the better off you are. And then when you do the work you're doing for people, do a good job, work harder, be more enthusiastic than other people, follow a direction very well, have good interpersonal relationships. And that's the most important thing you can do. And other thing to keep in mind too is if you're providing a lot more value than the person that you're replacing, then the law firm is going to really want to keep you. And the final thing to keep in mind too, one other thing is law firms are businesses. So because they're businesses, if they have enough work, then they're never going to let you go unless they can hire it's in their best interest to keep you there if they have enough work. So the law firm may have enough work for two people. The most important thing also for attorneys to do is you want to create work. So creating work means finding extra work that can be done for clients. And then it means working as hard as you can in the things you get and doing the best job you possibly can. So if you're enthusiastic, if people like you, if you follow direction well, and if you are just very good at what you do, then the law firm doesn't really have an incentive to let you go. Their incentive is going to be to keep you. And so you need to, when you're in that sort of the position you are, you need to just provide a lot of value. You typically don't want to worry about other people. There's always going to be a competition wherever you go, wherever you work. There's going to be people that would like your job or would like you to fail. And so you just have to do the absolute best work you can, have to be able to create work, do the best work. And if you do that, I don't think the odds of them letting you go are going to be pretty slim. And then how do you protect yourself? I don't know what state you're in. Some states are employment at will, like the law firm can let you go for no reason. Others aren't. It also depends, I think, where you work. But that would be my advice. Thank you. Okay, the next question. Oops, no, that's not it. Okay, next question. What are the most common career paths for attorneys working at a boutique law firm? Attorneys working at boutique law firms, you're much more likely to, if it's a smaller law firm, to be able to both get clients because boutique law firms are less expensive and they can represent smaller clients than major law firms. And so most attorneys that work at boutique law firms, smaller law firms, as opposed to larger law firms, end up staying working in law firms for the rest of their career. So attorneys that go into major firms will either go into a boutique law firm later on, or they'll go in-house, or they'll go to a smaller firm than a boutique firm. So most attorneys that go to work at boutique law firms will stay attorneys throughout their career. It's much easier to become a partner and that sort of thing than it is than in larger firms. It's actually a very interesting point. I have noticed that attorneys that go to work in boutique law firms, again, are much more likely to become partners, and they're also much more likely to stick with the profession for the long term as opposed to if they joined from a large firm. And I think that's just because it's easier to bring in clients. Usually it's easier in a smaller firm, it's easier to advance, even if you don't have clients. It's just that it's often less stressful and there's fewer hours. I think it's a very good decision for a lot of attorneys. There's boutique law firms that are really competitive to get into and really good, and there's ones that aren't. It all depends on the firm, but I think the most common career path for attorneys that go to smaller law firms is generally to stick with the profession much longer than those that don't. Let's see here. Tell me a story that's better than I went to law school, got all A's, and worked as a lawyer 30 years. That's definitely not me. I certainly did not get all A's in law school by any stretch of the imagination. And I don't, maybe this is this person. This person is probably saying about themselves, yeah, that's a good story. People do go to law school and get good grades and work as lawyers for 30 or more years. Some of them work for 50 years or 60 even. So yes, you can have a very good long-term career at doing it. And I would say that the one thing that we talk about a lot in these webinars is that it seems like a lot of the stories are negative and so forth, but they're really not. The majority of attorneys that graduate from law school end up going to not large firms, not even middle market firms. They end up going to small firms or starting their own firms, and they have good careers and they're happy. So it's not necessarily the profession is difficult, but it's not necessarily as bad as it may seem like I make it when I talk about it, because in most cases it can be pretty mellow, but the majority of attorneys don't take enough risk, and because of that, they're often not that happy. Okay, or they limit themselves. What should law students do if they're not getting interviews for legal internships or entry-level legal jobs? Anybody that's looking for a job, all you need to do is apply to enough places. There are an incredible number of places that law firms in the country. There are over 100,000, and there's over 1.5 million practicing attorneys. So you can apply to solo practitioners. You can apply to law firms. There's so many different places that you can apply to. It's just insane. If you look up lawyers in Reno, Nevada, or law firms, there's thousands probably. And Reno's a small market, or maybe not thousands. Any town in the country, any state in the country, there's so many places to apply. What would you do? What would I do if you're not getting interviews? Just apply to more places. I don't understand. And again, I'm actually glad that we're talking about this right now. So give me 1 second, because this is just fascinating. In the window, Google. Let me just do this. Give me 1 second. So I'm trying to find that's not good. Just give me a second. I'm going to share my screen. Check out the white screen. Give me a second. Is it? I want to make sure I'm sharing the right screen. Sorry, I don't want to share the wrong screen. Give me a second. This department. No, I'm trying to be careful of the screens I'm showing because I don't want to share a screen where there's candidate information on there. Let me see it. Let me see it. Tab Chrome. Is that right? Okay. So here's just an example. Like I don't know where you are. Maybe you could be in Portland, Oregon. So maybe I'm just saying. So you Portland, Oregon, well, I don't know, personal injury. I don't know what type of law you're interested in practicing, but if you go to any type of any firm, any practice area, regardless of what it is, you're going to find plenty of attorneys wherever it is where you're interested. You can do this for corporate attorneys. You can do this for whatever type of practice area you're interested in, whatever city you're interested in working. So this Rosenbaum Law Group. So you would simply, if you wanted to have an internship, here's Mike Rosenbaum and Ashley Rosenbaum. Let's say Mike, just because he's on top. So it's probably, you could go and you could email Mike and you could say something along the lines of, and I'll just show you, I'm going to do that. I'm not going to Rosenbaum. Actually, you can't do him anymore. I think he's retired. So we need to do Ashley. So Ashley, I'm interested in potentially a summer internship with your firm. I'm interested in personal injury. Would it be possible to set up a informational interview? If you do this with, you have all these people here, you've got probably hundreds. If you did that with hundreds of them, you could get a job. If you did it with just Oregon personal injury attorney, if you did it with Portland, Oregon real estate attorney, I don't know what practice area you're interested in. But this is just so easy to do. And so you just go and you apply to as many of these people as you can and telling them you're interested in their practice area. And if you do that, you will get a job. Getting a job, an internship is like the easiest thing in the world. No one, for whatever reason, no one seems like they're, so I'm trying to find the document I was working on again. No, everyone seems to have all these issues. Let me make sure I got the right thing here. Okay. Yeah, no one gets out there and applies to enough places. You could do that in an entire state. You could do it in a city. You can do it wherever you want, and you can do it in any practice area. You just need to reach out to people that don't necessarily have jobs. If you're trying to find a job and you're applying to the same jobs that everyone else is, then you're going to have a difficult time getting it because you're going to have to look like the best person on paper. And anytime someone has a job opening, they're going to get applicants from tons and tons of law students. So just create your own job and tell people you'll work for free if you need to. It's extremely important, by the way, too, for attorneys that want to work as attorneys when they get out of law school in law firms to try to at least get your last year, your third year of law, or your second summer to get something where you're getting experience in a law firm your second summer is incredibly valuable. It's just as important as how your grades are your second year. Probably more important because law firms are like much more likely to hire people multiple times if you have experience working someplace in the summer. Why is that? Because if you have experience someplace in the summer, it shows you want to work in a law firm. It also shows that you've learned what it's like to work in a law firm. If you decide you want to go for some rights group or something as a public interest your second summer of law school, that's not going to help you. People will think, oh, this person wants to be a public interest attorney. You should be in a law firm. And hopefully in the practice area you want to be in. It's extremely important. So do that, you're going to be much better off. Okay, next question. Let's see here. What do I do if I suspect my law firm is pushing me out? If your law firm is pushing you out, you have a couple of decisions. One decision you can make is you can try to stick around and work your hardest and overcome that, and maybe you will. But if your law firm's trying to push you out, there's probably reasons for that. They could be the quality of your work, they could be your salary, they could be your productivity, they could be if they like you, they could be who knows? They think you're too old. I don't know. But if a law firm is trying to push you out, you have to do what I just showed this other person. You have to go and aggressively find a new job. You should apply to any place that has an opening. You should make your job search a significant portion of your day. If I was looking for a job, I would do a bunch of different things. I would read things that I've written about and about how to get a job. I would run my job search like a major campaign. I would look for jobs on Indeed and LinkedIn, but I would also use Law Crossing because Law Crossing looks at firms that have positions on their websites or other places, or they're in small newspapers and legal publications that people are not finding that are not advertised on those sites. Most jobs, by the way, are on employer websites. They're not on LinkedIn or Indeed. It costs thousands of dollars for people to advertise jobs on those sites. Law firms and people will generally only advertise they will usually put things on their website instead of other places. So you should, and Law Crossing does that. It's the only site that I know does it for every legal employer they can find, law firms, government offices. But if you think your law firm is pushing you out, you need to aggressively look for a position, and it should be like a major priority for you. And you should be spending as much time as you can looking for a job. And because if you feel like you can't save where you're at, but to save where you're at, you need to do the best work you possibly can while you're there and work the hardest. But you generally, if someone's made up negative opinions of you, you can certainly change how they feel. But is it worth it? I don't know. But and again, you might be being paranoid, just taking things out of context and stuff, and maybe they're not pushing you out. But yeah, I would be aggressively looking for a job. My field of law, sustainability has been detrimentally impacted by the current administration. It has been challenging to look for a new role in this circumstance. Advice on people having to pivot because of forces beyond their control. Yes, so there are different practice areas that can be impacted politically or for different reasons. Sometimes practice areas literally just go out of, they just no longer exist. I've seen that happen. How to pivot for forces beyond your control. So you have a couple of different things you can do. One thing would be to do a more exhaustive job search all over the country, which a lot of people do. So if in that situation, the other thing you can do is you can try to refocus your resume on something that could make you employable somewhere else. You can do all sorts of things. I don't know if you're in a law firm or where you're working, but typically you would need to try to reposition your resume as something that's different. I saw something that fascinating happen yesterday. I was talking to this woman, preparing her for an interview, and the interview was for a real estate attorney. And I was reading her resume, and the resume talked all about real estate. And then it talked about real estate classes in law school and real estate internships she had when she was in, I don't know, law school or something. And then she's been it looked like she'd been a real estate attorney for the past 2 years. And then I asked her why she was looking for a job. And she said, I'm looking for a job because my firm does almost exclusively litigation, and I really want to do real estate law. And I said, well, your resume just makes it sound like you do nothing but real estate law. And she said, I do some. I have some work, but I do mainly litigation. And so she'd taken her resume and she'd rewritten it to be just real estate. And she'd actually gotten another job, not through me, as a real estate attorney that she hadn't taken. And they thought she was a real estate attorney too. And I said, actually, she'd been a real estate paralegal prior to law school. And then, but anyway, she had real estate experience. So she took her resume and she focused it on this practice area without talking a lot about litigation. She might have had a line at the end of a 4 or 5 lines talking about litigation. But so you make your resume seem like it's focused on something that is marketable. And then you downplay the stuff that may not be is marketable at the time. That's usually the main way that people do that. And that's what I would recommend, but very few people do that. What are the steps that take to get your resume sent to hundreds of firms in a small market such as Tennessee? You typically wouldn't send your resume to hundreds of firms. I'm telling people that there's a lot of places to apply to, but you have to have a practice area match, or your practice area has to match what the firm we're doing in Memphis, Tennessee. There has to be some reasons for that. You have to be moving there. You can't just apply to firms without there being some sort of match, and you can't just send your resume. You have to have some sort of expression of interest or something that would make a law firm interested in speaking with you. And so you can't just send your resume to hundreds of firms to expect any type of result. You have to give reasons why anytime you're applying to. What are the steps? They're as simple as researching the firms in the employment, researching firms in Memphis, and then finding the people to apply to in your practice area. Who would those people be? You can either apply to HR, or you could apply to someone that does the type of work you do in your practice area, or you have all sorts of, or you could apply to the hiring partner. You have all sorts of options. But if it was me, I would be looking at a lot of different employers in the market I wanted to relocate to. You also need to tell people why Memphis. If you're in North Carolina and you're sending resumes to Memphis, people are going to want to know why you would think about moving there, because they're not going to just bring someone into Memphis with no connection or reason to be there. So what would reasons be to move there? My spouse is moving there. I have family there. I have a lot of friends there. You have to have some sort of reasons to relocating to a market. And if you're there, that's good. But if you're relocating, law firms are going to, and any employer is going to want to know the reasons why. Okay. I don't think I can type this answer, but I'll try. How can a young attorney maximize returns, job offers when working with recruiters applying to law firms? When you're working with the recruiter will, it depends on the type of recruiter you're working with. Different recruiters may have access to different jobs, which is common to some extent, but it depends honestly on young attorneys should not always be using a recruiter. Realistically, to use a recruiter, you should have at least, you can have one, but you usually need about 2 years of experience before a recruiter is going to, it's in necessarily in your best interest of using a recruiter. Yeah, usually 1 to 2 years of experience. And then if you're working with a recruiter, the recruiter should have access to something that you don't on your own. And so that's, what I would recommend. How do you maximize job offers? Recruiters can help you when they have access to firms and they can, but also when they have relationships with existing firms, and then they can sell you to HR, whoever they're dealing with there. So that can be very helpful. But you need to have you need to have a relationship, hopefully, with a recruiter that can help you get in the door someplace. And so not all recruiters can, some recruiters can, some recruiters can't, but ultimately most of the market is candidate driven. So law firms are going to hire the people that best match what they need. Okay, let's see here. That one. How can I find a mentor in my law firm to help advance my legal career? So typically the way to find a mentor, you can't go ask someone to be your mentor. Typically you would do work for somebody in your firm, and then that person would help you, would take a like you, and then hopefully help guide you in your career. And that's how that typically works. It is a good idea for every attorney in any law firm to find someone who is the equivalent of a sponsor. A sponsor means someone that will stick up for you and help you often become a partner. In some law firms, it's actually crucial that you have a sponsor if you want to become a partner, or at least, or sponsors. The best sponsors are typically going to be people that have large books of business because they have influence over the firm in making decisions. So that's some of the things that how I would recommend, what I would recommend in terms of a sponsor, someone with business. But typically people will mentor or sponsor you if they see how hungry you are and you're trying, and you ask them questions, and you ask for honest questions, not just making conversation, but honest questions. You don't want to ask questions about political things too much or something that could get the person in trouble, but they will typically like you if you seem like if they like you and you seem honest, and not honest, but honestly interested in being better at your job, and they feel like they can help you. People feel important when they can help other people. It makes them feel good about themselves, but you can't come out and ask for help. You just need to ask questions about different things, and the questions should be positive. What should I do to be better? How do I learn about this? What do you think? Those sorts of things, not questions that would show your weakness. What do I do if I'm not getting along with this person? Or what? That's not always the best idea. Okay, how difficult is it for an attorney to switch from litigation to transactional law or vice versa? You can do anything if you want. Litigation and transactional are completely different branches of law. One, they involve different types of skills. So litigators typically like things like reading and writing and arguing, and transactional attorneys typically like things like math and science and certain types of details and so forth. It's a different type of psychology. Typically, if you are someone that's naturally good at reading and writing, and then you probably belong in litigation, but not necessarily. How difficult is the switch? It's actually pretty difficult. It's difficult because if you have 2 years of experience as a litigator and you start transactional law, you're essentially starting practicing law again because it's a completely different thing. So it can be very difficult to switch practice areas. So if you want to switch practice areas at the level that you're currently at, then meaning in terms of the prestige level of the firm and the compensation and so forth, it can be very difficult. The easiest way to do it is within your own firm. But even with your own firm, they're not always happy to do that because they may not have enough work in the other practice area. They hired you for one practice area. They need you in one practice area, a transactional litigation or litigation practice area. I'll tell you two quick stories about how hard it is. I was working with a guy years ago that was first in his class at, I don't know, Brigham Young, I think, law school. And he wanted to switch from litigation to corporate. And he'd applied to every job he could find all over the country when he came to me and hadn't gotten a single interview. I had some places that I had relationships with in Texas in particular. So I got him an interview in Texas and then he interviewed there and then they ultimately didn't hire him. But he ultimately ended up getting the firm that he was working at. They finally allowed him to switch practice areas. But it's very difficult. You can do it, but typically you can't do it at a firm that's at the same level as yours. You have to move into a firm that's not as prestigious. But why is that? Because why would a law firm take a risk on somebody to do a new practice area when they've already shown maybe they don't like practicing law and they just want to try to see if they like something else, which is often the case. So why would a law firm take that risk? So just you have to think about it that way. And then I think the other thing is that if you're switching practice areas, yeah, and why would a law firm with an opening for a transactional attorney hire a litigator when they can hire a transactional attorney? So it's unfortunate a lot of times when people get into practice areas that don't match their backgrounds or don't match their interests. But ultimately, one of the things I think is interesting is I always see these resumes of people that may have gone to Yale Law School. And when I see these resumes, you look at some of these resumes and they've gone to college and they've done incredibly well and they majored in classics and psychology and English and philosophy and all these things. And then they come out and they're these corporate attorneys or project finance attorneys in these different practice areas. And so they don't necessarily make use of their incredible verbal and skills, but they do these practice areas anyway. And so I don't know how much it matters sometimes, but if it was me, I really like reading and writing, so I would never be able to do a transactional practice area. So if you're not in the practice area you want, then you're often going to be better off doing a switching, that's my opinion. And you don't need to work for it. You need to work for anybody else. You can start your own firm. You don't need to, it might be a little difficult in transactional law, but there's all sorts of options that you can do. But ultimately, whatever practice area you choose, you're going to need to get training. And it takes about 5 years of training to learn almost any practice area. Not all practice areas, but a lot of practice areas. Okay, let's see. Yeah, how do you ignore the criticism when it's in your face coming from all directions and platforms? Do you just accept it and get bullied? It depends on the criticism. Obviously, if you're doing something that doesn't benefit anyone and everyone's mad about, then maybe that's something that you pay attention to. But if you're doing something you believe in and you're getting criticized and all these different people coming at you from different platforms, then you're going to accept it and will get bullied. If people are bullying you because of your politics, if people are bullying you because of I can't believe it. I was on X at some point, and I don't know why it came up, but someone was commenting about some person that was like some Nazi or something, and American Nazi, and just saying how awful they thought this person was, and then I clicked on this, and then all these people were piling on saying they hated this American Nazi person. I don't remember what his name was. I don't know, Stu Peters. I don't, but anyway, so then I clicked on the site of this American Nazi. And I don't know if he's Nazi or just what it was, but he's just very and negative opinions about different groups of people and immigrants and things. So I clicked on that and then I couldn't believe it. And this guy had like hundreds of thousands of followers. So I would say that probably 99% of the population, or maybe more, is very critical of this person, but 1%, he's got followers. And so if there are people that support you, or if you're doing something that you believe has some sort of benefit to society, and represents you, I wouldn't worry about it. But yeah, if the criticism is valid and you're doing things that if the criticism is valid, then maybe you adjust what you're doing. Maybe that'll make you more effective and better off. Sorry, what was that? How can I avoid getting discouraged when I receive multiple rejections? Because liars are oh, sorry, this is the wrong one. How can I avoid getting discouraged when I receive multiple rejections on legal internships or entry-level positions? You would like to answer this question. You shouldn't get discouraged. Why? That just means that someone else applied that either they don't have an opening or someone that's better, or who cares? You just keep applying to places. Do you think so? If you open your mailbox at home every day, you're going to get all sorts of offers for how about some new tires for your car? I don't know. Or how about a new roof? You'll get all these offers for different things. So why would you allow yourself to get, I don't think these roofing companies or these people selling tires or whatever are discouraged. Obviously, 99% of the people probably aren't going to take a coupon for tires that they get in the mail and do anything with it. So people should not get discouraged when you're receiving a rejection. Businesses do all the time. Business advertises on television. Not everyone's going to use the business. So you just need to make sure you don't take things seriously. And the more places you reach out to, the more you're likely to succeed. Okay, final questions here, unless anybody has any ones. How can I stay focused on my job search as an attorney when repeated rejections start making me doubt my qualifications? It shouldn't make you doubt your qualifications. That law firms are businesses. They will bring in the person that best represents the best person they can. You would too. So that's what they do. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong with their qualifications. It just means, or they might not even have the work, or they might have a job. Who knows? But you shouldn't worry about repeated rejections. It's not something that I would worry about if I was looking for a job, because you just need to apply to more places. Now, what else would I do if I was looking for a job and I'm getting all these rejections? I would take a look at, is my resume the way it should be? I'm doing something right in my cover letter. I watch all this sort of information to make sure that I'm putting my best foot forward and doing everything I can and applying to enough places. If you apply to firms in major markets, it's going to be usually a little bit more difficult to get jobs where you're competing with a lot of people than if you apply to places in smaller markets. If you apply to large law firms, you're often going to get a lot more rejection than if you apply to small law firms. And that's about it. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. And I will see everyone next week. I think this is a really important topic, and I hope that you learned a lot from it. And I will be back next week.